Deep beneath the bustling streets of London, hidden in plain sight, lie artifacts that defy explanation, objects so strange, so out of place, that they've baffled historians for centuries. Picture this, a Roman dagger buried in the shadow of a medieval church, its blade etched with symbols no one can decipher, or a chunk of obsidian, far older than the city itself, found wedged between the stones of a Tudor-era wall. These aren't just relics of the past, they're puzzles waiting to be solved, whispers from a history we thought we knew but clearly don't, and today we're going to unravel their secrets together. What if I told you that London, a city worn by time and layered with stories, still guards mysteries that challenge everything we assume about its past? These artifacts aren't merely misplaced or forgotten, they're anomalies, pieces that don't fit the grand narrative of kings and empires. Some were deliberately hidden, others lost by accident, but all of them carry clues to a shadow history, one that runs parallel to the textbooks. Who left them there, why, and what do they reveal about the unseen forces that shaped this city? This isn't just a tour of old objects, it's a detective story, a journey into the gaps of history where the most fascinating truths often hide. We'll examine the theories from the plausible to the downright chilling, and follow the trails left by these enigmatic artifacts. By the end, you might just see London in a whole new light, questioning what's really beneath your feet the next time you walk its ancient streets. So, are you ready to dig into the secrets that time forgot? Let's begin. Now, let's turn our attention to one of the most perplexing artifacts tied to London's shadow history, the so-called London Hammer. But here's the twist, it wasn't found in London at all. Discovered in the 1930s near the small town of London, Texas, this seemingly ordinary tool has sparked debates that stretch across centuries. Encased in a chunk of limestone dating back over 100 million years, the hammer's head is made of an iron alloy so pure, so advanced for its supposed age that it defies conventional metallurgy. How could an object of such refined craftsmanship exist in a geological layer from the Cretaceous period, long before humans even walked the Earth? Experts have clashed over this enigma for decades. Some argue the hammer slipped into the rock through natural fissures, its true age far younger than the stone around it. Others point to its unusual composition, iron without traces of sulfur or phosphorus, impurities common in ancient smelting as evidence of something far stranger. Could it be a relic of a lost civilization, one with technology beyond what we'd expect from any known ancient culture? Or is it an elaborate hoax planted to challenge our understanding of history? The mystery deepens when we consider its possible connections to London, England. While the hammer's Texas origins are well documented, fringe theorists speculate it might have been transported across the Atlantic, a piece of some forgotten trade or expedition. There's no concrete proof, but the name alone fuels speculation. What we do know is this: whether a geological fluke, a clever forgery, or a genuine anomaly, the London Hammer forces us to question the timeline of human ingenuity. And in a city like London, where layers of history constantly surprise us, perhaps the idea of a misplaced artifact isn't so far-fetched after all. The limestone encasing the London Hammer tells a story that shouldn't exist, a story written in stone, quite literally, that clashes with everything we know about human history. This isn't just any rock, it's a geological time capsule dating back to the Cretaceous period, an era when dinosaurs roamed and the continents were still shifting into their modern positions. For a hammer to be trapped inside such ancient stone would mean its maker walked the earth over 100 million years before the first Homo sapiens appeared. That's not just improbable, it's impossible, according to every established timeline of human evolution. So how do we reconcile this glaring contradiction? Geologists who have studied the hammer's rocky prison point to the natural processes that might explain its presence. Limestone is porous, prone to fractures and cavities forming over millennia. Could the hammer have slipped into one of these gaps only to be cemented in place by mineral-rich water over time? It's a tempting theory, except for one glaring hole. The hammer shows no signs of distortion or damage from such a process. Its handle, though partially fossilized, remains intact, and the head sits snugly within the stone as if placed there deliberately. Even more puzzling, the limestone immediately surrounding the hammer bears no telltale cracks or seams that would suggest a later intrusion. It's as if the hammer and the rock formed together, a partnership defying logic. Skeptics, of course, have their own take. Some argue the hammer is a 19th century miner's tool, perhaps dropped into a crevice and later encased by rapid mineral deposition. Others suspect an elaborate hoax, a modern artifact planted in ancient rock to stir controversy, but tests on the hammer's metallurgy complicate this theory. The iron head lacks the sulfur and phosphorus found in industrial-era tools, and its purity rivals techniques not seen until the 20th century. Even the wood of the handle, partially transformed into coal, suggests an age far older than any hoax could plausibly achieve. Then there are the fringe theories, voices arguing for forgotten civilizations or even extraterrestrial intervention. While mainstream science dismisses these ideas, they persist because the hammer embodies a tantalizing question. What if our understanding of history is incomplete? In a city like London, where every shovel strike can unearth Roman coins or medieval relics, the idea of an artifact out of time isn't just fantasy. It's a reminder that the past still holds surprises. Whether a geological fluke, a hoax, or something far stranger, the London hammer forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that some mysteries refuse to fit neatly into the boxes we've built for them. Among the many strange relics unearthed in London, few are as baffling as the Roman dodecahedron, a palm-sized bronze object, perfectly symmetrical, with 12 flat faces, each pierced by a circular hole of varying size. Discovered tucked beneath the foundations of an old Roman villa near the Thames, this intricate artifact dates back nearly 2,000 years, yet its purpose remains one of history's most stubborn enigmas. Unlike swords or pottery, which tell clear stories of daily life, the dodecahedron offers no such clues. It's beautifully crafted, yes, but what was it for? Theories abound, each more creative than the last. Some scholars suggest it was an astronomical tool, its holes aligned to track celestial movements or measure the angle of sunlight for planting crops. Others propose it served as a religious object, perhaps a sacred die cast in rituals to divine the future. Then there's the knitting theory, yes, knitting, where the dodecahedron could have been used to weave gloves, its holes guiding threads into precise patterns. But here's the catch, not a single Roman text, sketch, or inventory mentions such an object. If it was so important, why is it absent from the record? What makes this mystery even more intriguing is where it was found. London, or Londinium as the Romans called it, was a bustling hub of trade and military activity. Yet this dodecahedron wasn't excavated from a workshop or temple, but buried almost secretively, as if someone wanted it hidden. Over 100 of these objects have been found across Europe, but no two are identical. The holes vary in size, the craftsmanship differs slightly. Was each one customized for a specific purpose? Or were they the work of different artisans trying to replicate something they didn't fully understand? One compelling angle ties the dodecahedron to the Roman military. Imagine a soldier far from home using it to calculate distances or calibrate siege weapons. But why would such a vital tool lack any written instructions? Alternatively, could it have been a status symbol, a sort of ancient puzzle for wealthy elites to display their intellect? The truth might be simpler or far stranger. Without a Rosetta Stone for Roman oddities, we're left piecing together guesses. Perhaps the most haunting question isn't what the dodecahedron was for, but why its secret died with its makers. In a city like London, where every cobblestone seems to whisper a forgotten story, this bronze puzzle reminds us that some histories are deliberately silent. Whether a tool, a toy, or a token of something we've yet to comprehend, the dodecahedron challenges us to admit that even the most advanced civilizations leave behind riddles we may never solve. The Roman dodecahedron's peculiar design has led to a modern game of historical detective work, with researchers proposing everything from the practical to the downright peculiar. One of the more surprising theories comes from a group of experimental archaeologists who recreated the object and tested it as a knitting tool. Imagine this: the different-sized holes could act as guides for crafting gloves with fingers shaped by varying diameters. The team even produced a functional woolen glove using their replica, suggesting these objects might have been the Roman equivalent of a crafting gadget. Yet, if that's true, why haven't we found any traces of yarn or wear patterns consistent with fiber use? The absence of these clues leaves the theory intriguing but unproven. Another compelling idea positions the dodecahedron as a precision measuring device. Surveyors may have used it to calculate distances for road construction or land division, threading ropes through its holes to create consistent angles. This would explain why no two dodecahedrons are identical. Each might have been calibrated for specific tasks. But again, the silence of Roman manuals raises doubts. Wouldn't such a vital tool merit at least a passing mention in surviving texts? The plot thickens when we examine similar finds across Europe. In Germany, a dodecahedron was discovered near a military outpost, hinting at a possible connection to the Roman army. In France, another was unearthed alongside coins and jewelry, suggesting a ceremonial role. The lack of a consistent context only deepens the puzzle. Were these objects repurposed for different uses in different places, or did they serve a single, now lost function that adapted to local needs? Perhaps the most tantalizing clue comes from a recent discovery in Belgium, where a dodecahedron was found with faint markings resembling zodiac symbols. Could it have been an astrological instrument used to track celestial events or even predict auspicious dates? Without corroborating evidence, this remains speculative, but it underscores how one artifact can inspire a dozen divergent stories. What unites all these theories is the dodecahedron's defiance of categorization. In a world where Roman technology is often celebrated for its logic and efficiency, this object feels almost mischievous, a deliberate riddle cast in bronze. Whether a tool, a toy, or a token of a forgotten ritual, its true purpose may forever elude us, and that's precisely what makes it so captivating. In a city like London, where history is written in layers, the dodecahedron reminds us that some chapters are written in code, waiting for a key we might never find. Tucked away behind an iron grille on Cannon Street, the London stone seems almost laughably ordinary at first glance, a weathered chunk of limestone no bigger than a loaf of bread. But don't let its modest appearance fool you. This rock carries the weight of centuries, tied to legends so potent that even Shakespeare wove it into his plays. Some say it was a talisman placed by the mythical Brutus of Troy, London's legendary founder, who believed the stone's survival would guarantee the city's immortality. Others claim it was the plinth of a Roman goddess's statue, or the altar where druids performed rituals long before London had a name. What's undeniable is the stone's eerie endurance. It survived the Great Fire of 1666, the Blitz of World War II, and countless rebellions that reshaped the city around it. Medieval kings struck it with swords to legitimize their rule, believing it held the city's soul. During Jack Cade's rebellion in 1450, insurgents famously struck the stone to symbolically seize authority, as if controlling it meant controlling London itself. Even today, developers planning to move it face bizarre setbacks, equipment failures, sudden funding gaps fueling whispers that the stone refuses to be displaced. The wildest theories suggest it's a fragment of something far older. Geologists note its oolitic limestone matches quarries in Kent, but folklore insists it's a piece of Excalibur's stone or a meteorite with celestial power. More pragmatically, it might have been a Roman milestone, the heart of Londinium's road network, yet no records from the time confirm this, leaving room for speculation. Perhaps the most chilling legend ties it to a prophecy: so long as the stone of Brutus is safe, so too shall London flourish. When the stone was temporarily relocated during World War II, the city endured the Blitz. Coincidence or something more? Whether sacred relic, political symbol, or geological oddity, the London stone defies simple explanation. It's a silent witness to history, a rock that's outlasted empires and keeps its secrets locked tight. The London stone's legend stretches far beyond its physical form, entwining with the myths of kings and conquerors who shaped Britain's earliest stories. Take King Arthur, for instance. Some versions of his legend claim the stone was the very one from which he drew Excalibur, a fragment of the sword's pedestal left behind as a marker of his rightful rule. It's a poetic idea that this unassuming rock could be the last remnant of a golden age, a tangible thread connecting London to Camelot's grandeur. Even Geoffrey of Monmouth, the 12th century chronicler who popularized Arthur's tales, hinted at the stone's divine origins, suggesting it was brought to Britain by a race of giants. But the Arthur link is just one layer. The stone's oldest legend ties it to Brutus of Troy, the mythical exile said to have founded London 1,000 years before the Romans arrived. According to medieval chroniclers, Brutus carried the stone from the ruins of Troy as a sacred talisman, embedding it in the heart of his new city with a prophecy: as long as the stone stood, London would never fall. It's no accident that Shakespeare later referenced it in Henry VI, where Jack Cade strikes the stone to claim authority. The playwright knew its power as a symbol, an object so steeped in lore that touching it could legitimize a rebel or a king. What's fascinating is how these myths converge on a single theme: endurance. Whether as Arthur's relic or Brutus's charm, the stone embodies London's unyielding spirit. During the Great Fire, as flames consumed the city, the stone survived unscathed. When the Blitz reduced neighborhoods to rubble, it stood untouched. Coincidence, perhaps, but to believers, these near-miraculous survivals prove its mythical role. Even the stone's modern guardians treat it with reverence. Witness the uproar when developers tried to move it in 2018, only to face bizarre delays that some called the stone's revenge. Then there's the Druid connection. Before Brutus or Arthur, some theorize the stone was a pagan altar, its smooth top worn by countless rituals. Roman accounts describe Celtic priests performing sacrifices on sacred stones, and the London stone's location near the ancient Walbrook River, a site of religious significance, lends credence to this idea. If true, it's a silent witness to the city's spiritual transformations, from pagan rites to Christian coronations. The stone's power lies in its ambiguity. It's a geological oddity that became a political prop, a religious relic, and a literary motif. Every era projected its fears and hopes onto it, turning a lump of limestone into a mirror for London's identity. Whether you see it as a holy artifact or a historical accident, one thing's certain. In a city built on layers of conquest and reinvention, the London stone is the ultimate survivor. And that, perhaps, is the real magic, not in its origins, but in its stubborn refusal to be forgotten. Buried beneath the wooden floorboards of a building on London's Cheapside Street, a wooden box sat forgotten for over 300 years until 1912, when laborers struck it with a pickaxe, sending a shower of emeralds, rubies, and sapphires skittering across the dirt. This was the Cheapside Hoard, the world's greatest cache of Elizabethan and Jacobean jewelry, a dazzling time capsule of 16th and 17th century craftsmanship. Over 400 pieces lay hidden inside, rings set with rose-cut diamonds, pendants carved from Colombian emeralds, even a delicate watch fashioned from a single hollowed-out pearl. Each piece was a masterpiece, but the real mystery wasn't their beauty. It was why they'd been abandoned in the first place. The hoard's craftsmanship speaks to a golden age of trade and artistry. Many gems trace back to the mines of South America, brought to Europe by Spanish galleons and smuggled into London via underground networks. The watch alone is a marvel, its tiny mechanical movement imported from Germany, cradled in a pearl that would have cost a fortune. But perhaps most intriguing are the toadstone rings, medieval amulets made from fossilized fish teeth, believed to protect against poison. Their presence alongside cutting-edge designs hints at a clientele straddling superstition and sophistication, a world where science and magic still danced hand in hand. So why was such treasure left behind? The leading theory points to the Great Fire of 1666. Cheapside was ground zero for London's jewelers, and the building's cellar, where the hoard was found, likely belonged to a goldsmith or merchant. When flames tore through the city, the owner may have fled, assuming the stash was lost. But there's a darker possibility. The hoard could have been hidden intentionally, perhaps by a criminal fence stashing stolen goods or a royalist sympathizer safeguarding wealth during Cromwell's Puritan crackdown. The truth died with whoever buried it. The hoard's fate after discovery is almost as mysterious as its origins. The laborers sold it piecemeal to a local pawnbroker for a pittance, scattering artifacts across collections before historians could document them. Today, less than half survive, with the finest displayed at the Museum of London. Yet even these fragments whisper secrets, like a salamander brooch, its ruby eyes winking. In Renaissance Europe, salamanders symbolized immortality, believed to survive fire unharmed. Fitting, then, that these jewels endured centuries in darkness, only to resurface as glittering proof of a London that refused to be forgotten. Who buried the Cheapside Hoard? The answer may lie in the chaotic underbelly of 17th-century London, a world where wealth and danger walked hand in hand. Picture a goldsmith like Thomas Simpson, a master craftsman whose shop stood just doors from where the hoard was found. Records show he specialized in delicate gemstone settings similar to those in the hoard, but he vanished from tax rolls after 1640, around the time the stash might have been hidden. Was he a victim of the English Civil War, forced to flee and leave his life's work behind? Or consider the possibility of a clandestine jeweler catering to wealthy Catholics who faced persecution under Protestant rule. A crucifix-shaped pendant in the hoard, cleverly disguised as a fashionable brooch, hints at covert religious symbolism. The hoard's sheer diversity points to multiple owners. Some pieces, like the pearl watch, scream aristocracy, perhaps commissioned by a noble family hiding assets during Cromwell's seizure of royalist property. Others, like rough-cut emeralds still embedded in matrix rock, suggest a dealer's unfinished stock. Then there's the case of Jacobean courtier Philip Herbert, whose wife adored Colombian emeralds. His London mansion burned in the Great Fire, possibly trapping valuables beneath rubble. But the most tantalizing theory involves the underground trade. Spanish gem smugglers operated through Cheapside's back alleys, bribing customs officers to avoid King James' steep import taxes. A single emerald the size of a thumb could buy a ship's cargo, making the hoard worth a staggering sum. If its owner was caught, leaving no paper trail would be wiser than claiming it. The hoard's abandonment during the Great Fire remains the likeliest scenario. As flames swallowed Cheapside, a jeweler named Lawrence Twiston was recorded fleeing with 2 small bags while his cellar, packed with inventory, burned. The timing fits. Several hoard pieces show heat damage, as if someone tried but failed to rescue them. Yet even this explanation leaves gaps. Why bury such valuables instead of selling them during the economic turmoil preceding the fire? Unless, of course, they were never meant to be sold, only survived. This is the hoard's true magic. It reflects London's resilience. Whether hidden by a persecuted Catholic, a smuggling kingpin, or a goldsmith fleeing war, its survival mirrors the city's own. Each gem holds a story of risk, faith, or desperation, whispers of lives upended by history's tides. And perhaps that's why it captivates us, not just for its glitter, but for the human drama sealed in that wooden box, waiting centuries to be told. In the heart of London's financial district, where skyscrapers tower over ancient streets, construction crews in 2016 stumbled upon a ghost from the city's past, a 2-ton Roman sarcophagus buried beneath Leadenhall Street for nearly 2,000 years. This wasn't just any burial chest. Its ornate carvings told a story of wealth and mystery, a relic from Londinium's heyday as a bustling imperial hub. But when archaeologists pried open its lid, they found something that turned textbook assumptions about Roman burial rites upside down. The sarcophagus itself is a masterpiece of craftsmanship, hewn from creamy Clipsham limestone, a material so prized it was hauled over 100 miles from quarries in the East Midlands. Its sides are carved with intricate garlands and mythical beasts, a lion locked in combat with a serpent, a motif symbolizing victory over death. Such lavish detail suggests its occupant was no ordinary citizen, but a figure of status, perhaps a merchant grown rich on Londinium's trade or a retired centurion rewarded for service. Yet the real shock came when researchers peered inside. Instead of the expected skeletal remains, they found a lead-lined interior filled with a peculiar amber-colored liquid, its surface dotted with fragments of gold leaf and what appeared to be disintegrating fabric. This liquid, later analyzed as a mixture of oils and resins, points to a burial practice rarely documented in Roman Britain. While embalming was common in Egypt, it was virtually unheard of this far north. The presence of the lead lining adds another layer of intrigue. Lead was expensive, often reserved for high-status burials, but it was also believed to have magical properties, sealing the deceased from restless spirits. Was this an attempt to preserve the body for some afterlife ritual, or did the occupant's family cling to beliefs from a distant homeland? Then there's the mystery of who lay inside. The liquid preserved no bones, only a single ivory hairpin, its tip carved into the shape of a lotus flower, an Egyptian motif. Londinium was a melting pot, home to traders from across the empire, but Egypt was a world away. Could this have been the tomb of a wealthy immigrant blending Roman and Egyptian traditions in death? Or perhaps a follower of the cult of Isis, whose London temple was just a mile from the burial site? The sarcophagus's location deepens the puzzle. It wasn't found in a cemetery, but beneath what would have been a busy street flanked by shops and taverns. Roman law usually forbade burials within city walls, yet here it lay, hidden in plain sight. Some scholars argue it might have been a later, secret reburial, a desperate act during a plague or uprising. Others suggest it was deliberately placed as a guardian relic, a spiritual sentinel for the neighborhood. What makes the Leadenhall sarcophagus so captivating isn't just its defiance of expectations, but the way it mirrors London itself, a city built on layers of adaptation and hidden stories. Every detail, from the imported stone to the enigmatic fluids, whispers of connections spanning continents and cultures. It's a reminder that even in death, the Romans left clues to a world far more complex than we often imagine. And in a modern city racing toward the future, this ancient box of mysteries sits like a time capsule, waiting for the next chapter of its story to be uncovered. The carvings on the Leadenhall sarcophagus aren't just decorative, they're a language of symbols, each one a clue to the beliefs and identity of whoever was laid to rest inside. Take the lion battling the serpent, a scene that dominates one side of the coffin. In Roman mythology, this was more than a dramatic fight. It represented the triumph of order over chaos, a theme echoed in everything from imperial propaganda to household shrines. The lion, often linked to Hercules or Sol Invictus, symbolized strength and divine favor, while the serpent embodied chthonic forces, the underworld, rebirth, or even disease. For a high-status individual in Londinium, a city perched on the edge of the known world, this imagery might have been a declaration, a claim that even in death they were protected by Rome's power, or perhaps a plea to the gods for safe passage to the afterlife. But the symbolism gets richer when we look closer. Woven between the beasts are garlands of oak leaves and acorns, a motif tied to Jupiter, king of the Roman gods. Yet the oak also held deep significance for Celtic Britons, who saw it as sacred long before the legions arrived. This blending of Roman and native imagery suggests a fascinating cultural hybridity. Was the sarcophagus's occupant a Roman official assimilating local customs to ease governance, or a Briton who'd climbed the social ladder, embracing imperial iconography while quietly honoring older traditions? The answer might lie in another detail: a small, barely noticeable carving of a ship near the base, its sails billowing as if mid-voyage. Londinium thrived as a port, and merchants from Gaul, Germania, and even North Africa walked its streets. That ship could symbolize a life spent crossing borders, literally or metaphorically. Then there's the ivory hairpin found floating in the embalming fluid, its lotus design a glaring outlier. In Roman Britain, Egyptian motifs usually pointed to one thing: the cult of Isis. This goddess of magic and resurrection had devotees across the empire, including a temple in London itself. Followers believed she could grant immortality, and her rituals often involved oils and resins like those in the sarcophagus. If the occupant was an initiate, their burial becomes a coded ritual. The lead lining wasn't just practical, it might have been a barrier against evil spirits, mirroring Isis's role as protector of the dead. The lotus, rising pristine from muddy waters, echoed her promise of rebirth. Status whispers from every inch of this coffin. The Clipsham limestone alone would have cost a fortune to transport, and the lead lining was a luxury few could afford. But it's the absence of inscriptions that's most telling. Most elite Roman sarcophagi bore names or epitaphs, yet this one is silent. Was the occupant's identity dangerous to acknowledge? During Londinium's turbulent 3rd century, Christians and political dissidents faced persecution. Or perhaps they were a self-made merchant, wealthy but lacking noble blood, their name unimportant compared to the symbols that guaranteed their soul's journey. What emerges is a portrait of a city and a person stitched together from contradictions: Roman but local, imperial but intimate, a resting place that's both a statement of power and a fragile hope against the dark. In today's London, where cultures collide as fiercely as they did 2 millennia ago, the sarcophagus feels less like a relic and more like a mirror. The Billingsgate Roman helmet gleams from its museum case like it was polished yesterday, but this isn't just a relic of war, it's a whisper from Londinium's shadowed riverbanks. Discovered in 2008 by workers dredging near London Bridge, the bronze cavalry helmet stunned archaeologists with its near-perfect preservation, its cheek guard still hinged, its ornate browband etched with intricate scrollwork. Designed for show, not combat, this was the Ferrari of headgear, worn by elite riders in parades or tournaments to dazzle crowds and signal status. But how did such a prized object end up at the bottom of the Thames? The answer might lie in the river's ancient role as a spiritual highway. For centuries, the Thames served as a sacred dumping ground for treasures, swords, shields, even human skulls, all offered to the water gods in exchange for protection or victory. The helmet's discovery alongside a cache of Roman coins suggests a deliberate deposit, perhaps a cavalryman's plea for divine favor before battle. But there's a twist. Analysis revealed the helmet was reshaped in antiquity, its brim carefully folded inward, a ritual deformation found in votive hoards across Europe. Was this a farewell gift to the gods from a retiring soldier, or a general's sacrifice after a crushing defeat? Ceremonial helmets like this were more than armor, they were walking propaganda. The browband's scrolling vines echo motifs from Rome's eastern provinces, hinting at the wearer's far-flung postings. The silver-plated eyebrows, exaggerated in a perpetual furrow, projected unshakable authority. Even the tiny holes along the rim likely held plumes or horsehair crests, transforming the rider into a mythic figure. Yet it's the dents that tell the most human story, microscopic wear on the inner lining suggests years of use, long enough for the owner's sweat to corrode the bronze. This wasn't just a trophy, it was part of someone's identity. Not all theories point to ritual sacrifice. Some scholars argue the helmet could have been lost in transit, perhaps tumbling from a supply barge during Londinium's chaotic 3rd century when the city's defenses were crumbling. Others note its proximity to a long-vanished Roman bridge. Might it have slipped from a rider's grip during a crossing? The truth may never be certain, but the helmet's survival is its own miracle. Most Roman ceremonial gear was melted down for scrap. That this piece endured, cradled by Thames mud for 18 centuries, feels like a message. A reminder that London's river doesn't just hide secrets, it keeps them, waiting for the right moment to let them surface. Rivers were more than just waterways to the Romans. They were living gods deserving of offerings and reverence. The Billingsgate helmet fits into a tradition that stretched across the empire, where warriors and rulers cast prized possessions into sacred waters as acts of devotion. From the swords sunk in Germany's Rhine to the cauldrons deposited in France's Seine, these weren't casual losses but deliberate sacrifices, gifts to unseen powers believed to control fate itself. London's Thames was no exception. Before the Romans arrived, Celtic tribes likely threw ceremonial weapons into its currents, and the helmet's discovery suggests the conquerors adopted, or co-opted, this ancient practice. What sets the Billingsgate find apart is its condition. Unlike battle-damaged relics, this helmet was meticulously deformed before deposition, its brim folded inward with ceremonial precision. This matches votive customs found as far away as Denmark, where helmets were ritually killed to release their spiritual essence. For a Roman cavalryman whose identity was intertwined with his gear, this act would have been deeply personal, a surrender of status to the divine. The coins buried alongside it add another layer. Struck with the faces of emperors, they weren't just currency but talismans, linking the giver to Rome's imperial cult. Together, they paint a picture of Londinium as a place where military might and mystic belief walked hand in hand. The helmet's design amplifies its spiritual weight. Those exaggerated silver eyebrows weren't just for show. They evoked Jupiter's brow, a divine nod to protection. The vine scrolls along the brim mirrored motifs found in Mithraic temples, a soldier's cult that promised victory through ritual. Even its lack of combat scars hints at a symbolic role. This wasn't battlefield gear but a consecrated object, perhaps worn in triumphs or religious processions before being offered to the Thames. Comparisons to other finds reveal a pattern. Near Hadrian's Wall, a similar helmet was found in a spring, wrapped in cloth like a sacred bundle. In the Netherlands, a cavalry mask turned up in a peat bog placed beside a slaughtered horse. These weren't random acts but part of a shared spiritual language, one that transcended borders. Londinium, as a cosmopolitan hub, likely absorbed traditions from across the empire. British votive customs blended with Roman state religion, Germanic war rites, and Eastern mystery cults. The helmet embodies this fusion, a metal prayer cast into dark waters by hands that believed in the power of both empire and earth. What does this tell us about London's spiritual heartbeat under Rome? The Thames was a threshold, a place where the mundane met the divine. Offerings like the helmet suggest a city hedging its bets, honoring old gods and new, seeking favor from forces seen and unseen. In a frontier town prone to revolt and invasion, such rituals weren't superstition but survival. Every folded brim, every scattered coin was a plea, keep us safe. Let us endure. 2 millennia later, as the helmet gleams under museum lights, that prayer feels hauntingly familiar. London still stands, perhaps someone listened. Beneath the glass and steel of modern London's financial district lies a relic so unexpected, so steeped in secrecy, that its discovery in 1954 stopped traffic literally. Workers excavating a new office building near Walbrook Street struck stone not with the dull thud of rubble, but with the crisp echo of precision carving. What they'd found was no ordinary basement. It was the Temple of Mithras, a subterranean sanctuary where Roman soldiers and merchants once whispered oaths under the gaze of a dying god. The temple's layout reads like a blueprint for mystery. Sunken 3 meters below street level, its narrow nave and flanking aisles were designed to mimic the cave where Mithras, the Persian god of light and truth, was said to have slain the cosmic bull. This wasn't a place for public worship. It was a clandestine clubhouse accessible only to initiates who'd endured grueling trials. The artifacts left behind tell a tantalizing story. A marble head of Mithras himself, his Phrygian cap tilted as if mid-ritual. A silver dedication plaque bearing the name Ulpius Silvanus, a veteran possibly initiated in far-off Syria. And most haunting, a series of 7 carved benches where recruits progressed through the cult's ranks, each step marked by symbolic death and rebirth. But the real intrigue lies in what wasn't found. Unlike Christian churches, Mithraic temples left no scriptures, no detailed records of their rites. Everything we know comes from fragments and educated guesses. Take the Tauroctony, the iconic scene of Mithras slaying the bull that dominated every temple. To the uninitiated, it's just a vivid mural. To insiders, every element, the scorpion, the dog, the raven, was a coded reference to celestial alignments, a map of the soul's journey hidden in plain sight. Even the temple's orientation was deliberate, aligned so that on the winter solstice, the rising sun would illuminate the god's face, a fleeting moment of divine revelation. The cult's appeal in Londinium speaks volumes about the city's crossroads culture. Mithras was a soldier's god, promising victory and brotherhood, which explains why his temples clustered near military posts. But London's version drew merchants too, evidenced by the ivory-writing styluses and delicate scales found buried nearby. In a city teeming with foreigners, the cult offered something rare, a bond that transcended language or lineage. Why was such a powerful group forgotten? When Christianity became Rome's state religion, Mithraism was ruthlessly suppressed. Temples were defaced or repurposed. London's was likely filled with rubble to deconsecrate it. But the Walbrook's damp earth preserved what zealots sought to erase. Today, as visitors peer through the reconstructed temple's gloom, they're standing in the shadow of a paradox, a religion built on secrecy, rediscovered because it was too stubborn to stay hidden. And perhaps that's the most Mithraic irony of all. The god who demanded silence now speaks loudest through the very ruins his enemies tried to bury. The Temple of Mithras wasn't just a place of worship. It was a theater of transformation, where ordinary men became initiates through rituals so secret, even now, we can only piece together fragments of their meaning. Picture this, a dimly lit underground chamber, the air thick with the scent of burning pine resin, as a hooded figure leads a recruit through a series of trials designed to strip away his old identity. Water, fire, even mock burials, each step mirrored Mithras's own mythic journey, culminating in a symbolic rebirth. This wasn't religion as we think of it today. It was an immersive experience, a spiritual boot camp that forged unbreakable bonds among its members. And in a city like Londinium, where soldiers and merchants from across the empire rubbed shoulders, that sense of belonging was priceless. Artifacts from the Walbrook Temple hint at the cult's elaborate hierarchy. 7 graded benches, each representing a step closer to enlightenment, tell us advancement wasn't just about faith, it was about endurance. Initiates likely progressed from the rank of raven to lion, with each promotion demanding new tests of loyalty and courage. A marble relief found in the ruins shows Mithras slaying the bull, but look closer. The scene is flanked by twin torchbearers, Quartz and Cotopates, one holding his torch up, the other down. Scholars believe these figures symbolized sunrise and sunset, life and death, a reminder that every ending carried the seed of a new beginning. For soldiers far from home, facing battle's chaos, this cyclical view of existence offered profound comfort. But the temple's true genius lay in its adaptability. While Mithraism had roots in Persian mythology, it absorbed local flavors wherever it spread. In Londinium, fragments of Celtic-style pottery were found mixed with Roman votive offerings, suggesting the cult didn't just coexist with native traditions, it blended them. A small bronze figurine of Mercury discovered near the temple's entrance underscores this duality. To Romans, Mercury was the messenger god. To Celts, he resembled Lugus, a deity of trade and skill. By allowing such overlaps, Mithraism became a bridge between cultures, offering a shared language of symbols in a city teeming with outsiders. The temple's design reveals even more about its clandestine nature. Unlike Christian basilicas built to awe the masses, Mithraeums were intimate, even claustrophobic. The Walbrook Temple could hold maybe 30 people at most, reinforcing the cult's exclusivity. Its ceiling was painted midnight blue, dotted with stars, a celestial map that turned rituals into cosmic journeys. And then there's the alignment. On the winter solstice, sunlight would pierce the doorway at dawn, striking a silver disc placed on the altar. For one fleeting moment, light triumphed over darkness, mirroring Mithras's victory. This wasn't just architecture, it was storytelling in stone and shadow. Yet for all its influence, Mithraism vanished almost overnight when Christianity rose to power. The Walbrook Temple's final days are poignant. Someone took care to bury the marble heads of Mithras and Serapis face down, a deliberate act of desecration. The altars were smashed, the sacred well filled with rubble. But in a twist of irony, these attempts to erase the cult ensured its survival. The very soil meant to silence the temple preserved its secrets, waiting centuries for a construction crew's pickaxe to set them free. Today, as visitors walk the temple's reconstructed aisles, they're treading on a paradox, a religion built on hidden truths, now laid bare by time. And perhaps that's the ultimate lesson of London's Mithraeum. Some mysteries refuse to stay buried. The stretch of London, once known as the Walbrook Valley, has given up many secrets, but none more unsettling than the cluster of human skulls found buried in its dark, peaty soil. Unearthed during construction projects over the past 2 centuries, these skulls number in the dozens, some remarkably intact, others fragmented by time. All deposited without their bodies, their empty eye sockets staring up from the earth like silent witnesses to a forgotten horror. What makes this discovery even stranger is the absence of other bones. Where are the spines, the ribs, the limbs that should accompany them? This isn't a typical Roman cemetery where full skeletons lie in neat rows. These skulls seem to have been placed here deliberately, collected and concealed like macabre trophies. One prevailing theory points to Londinium's grisly past as a military outpost. Roman historians like Tacitus recorded British tribes decapitating enemies in battle, displaying heads as warnings. Could these skulls belong to rebellious Celts, executed and paraded as a lesson to others? The Walbrook ran near the city's amphitheater, where gladiators fought and criminals met very public ends. But there's a twist. Many skulls show no signs of violent trauma. Some even bear evidence of careful preservation, their teeth worn down by lifetimes of grain-heavy diets, suggesting they belong to ordinary citizens, not warriors. Then there's the spiritual angle. The Celts venerated the head as the seat of the soul, and sacred springs across Europe have yielded similar caches. The Walbrook's waters, now buried beneath modern streets, may have been a holy site where skulls were offered to underworld deities. Archaeologists found several arranged in a circle, their foreheads smeared with ochre, a ritual gesture seen in Neolithic burials. Could this be a fusion of Celtic and Roman death rites, a quiet rebellion against imperial rule under the guise of tradition? But the most haunting possibility is far simpler: floods. The Walbrook was notorious for overflowing, and forensic studies reveal many skulls bear waterborne sediment patterns. In ancient Rome, improper burial was a spiritual catastrophe. If graves were washed away, survivors might have gathered whatever remains they could find, hence the skulls, the most durable part of the body, and reburied them en masse. Yet even this pragmatic explanation can't account for the eerie neatness of some deposits stacked like cordwood in the mud. The truth may lie in layers, quite literally. London's soil is a palimpsest of disaster and renewal, and the Walbrook skulls could represent multiple histories at once: trophies of war, sacred offerings, flood salvage. What's certain is that they force us to confront the messy, mutable nature of memory. In a city that's constantly building over its past, these silent faces remind us that some stories refuse to stay buried even when the bodies they belong to have long since turned to dust. Forensic analysis of the Walbrook skulls reveals a chilling catalogue of suffering etched into bone. Some bear the unmistakable marks of violent death, depressed fractures from blunt force trauma, clean cuts from sharp blades, even puncture wounds matching the triangular tips of Roman military spears. One particularly gruesome specimen shows signs of peri-mortem defleshing, grooves left by knives scraping bone, suggesting an execution followed by deliberate mutilation. Yet alongside these battlefield horrors, other skulls tell quieter stories of hardship. Pitted lesions hint at chronic malnutrition, while dental abscesses and sinus infections speak to lives spent in damp, crowded tenements. The most haunting cases show evidence of trepanation, crude holes drilled into the cranium, possibly attempted cures for headaches or epilepsy, though we'll never know if the patients survived the ordeal. The mix of trauma types fuels debates about these remains. Were they victims of Londinium's infamous amphitheater, where gladiators and condemned criminals met brutal ends? The presence of female and child skulls complicates this theory. Roman games rarely featured such participants. Alternatively, could they reflect emergency measures during crises? 5th century texts describe London abandoned during the Great Conspiracy, when northern tribes overran the city. A mass execution of prisoners might explain the clustered burials. Then there's the plague hypothesis. Some skulls display porous lesions characteristic of tuberculosis or leprosy, diseases that sparked panic in antiquity. Fearing miasma, survivors may have disposed of contagious corpses hastily, severing heads to prevent the dead from walking. Chemical analysis adds another layer. Isotopes in tooth enamel trace several skulls to distant regions North Africa, the Danube frontier, revealing London as a melting pot of immigrants and slaves. One young male's bones contained arsenic levels suggesting metalwork exposure, perhaps a smith brought to the city in chains, yet others were locals, their chemistry matching London's chalky water. This diversity undermines the theory of a single massacre, pointing instead to accumulated deaths over centuries. Perhaps most intriguing are the ritualistic elements. Several skulls were arranged facing east, aligning with Celtic solar beliefs. One cluster had oak leaves placed in their eye sockets, a possible nod to druidic traditions of the head cult. Roman law banned such practices, but clandestine ceremonies may have persisted. The Walbrook's oxygen-deprived soil preserved organic traces rarely found elsewhere: strands of hair twisted into knots, resinous substances that might represent funeral ointments or embalming experiments. These silent witnesses force us to confront London's dual nature, a place of imperial order and underground resistance, where official history and grassroots memory collided. Whether fallen gladiators, plague victims, or rebels paying the ultimate price, their skulls form a mosaic of the city's hidden violence. Modern DNA studies may soon reveal more, but some stories, written in bone but not in books, might remain forever half-told. What's certain is that the Walbrook's dead refused to be anonymous, their fractured lives whispering across millennia through the language of trauma and tenacity. Just steps from where Chaucer's pilgrims gathered at the Tabard Inn, archaeologists digging in modern-day Southwark unearthed a trove of medieval relics that blur the line between history and legend. Among the rubble of what was once London's most famous coaching house, they found pewter pilgrim badges, tiny, mass-produced souvenirs depicting saints and shrines, their pins still sharp enough to snag fabric after 600 years. One badge shows Thomas Becket's martyrdom at Canterbury, the very pilgrimage immortalized in the Canterbury Tales, while another bears the scallop shell of Santiago de Compostela, proof that London's travelers ventured far beyond English shores. These humble trinkets were the medieval equivalent of fridge magnets, bought for pennies by pilgrims to prove they'd completed their spiritual journeys. But their discovery at the Tabard reveals something deeper: how faith, commerce, and storytelling intertwined in the shadow of London's walls. The inn's cellar yielded even more intimate traces of its guests: a leather shoe with a worn-down heel, likely discarded after miles of walking, a wooden bowl scorched by decades of pottage simmering over the hearth, and most poignant, a child's toy horse carved from bone. Each object whispers of lives paused mid-journey, ordinary people who became part of Chaucer's Sundry Folk simply by passing through these doors. Historical records suggest the Tabard wasn't just a pit stop but a microcosm of medieval society. Friars and fishmongers, knights and knaves all slept under its roof, their belongings mingling in the crowded dormitories upstairs. A broken strap and engraved with a merchant's mark hints at deals struck over ale, while a dice made from antler, loaded with a hidden weight, testifies to the timeless hustle of travelers parting fools from their coins. What makes these artifacts extraordinary is their connection to tangible moments in literature. When Chaucer wrote of the inn's broad courtyard and large chambers, he was describing a real place, one that scaffolding receipts confirm could stable 50 horses and host 200 guests. The excavated foundation walls match his descriptions exactly, right down the arched gateway where pilgrims would have assembled at dawn. Even the soil tells a story. Layers of ash and oyster shells suggest the raucous feasts mentioned in the tales, while traces of hops and barley confirm the Tabard's reputation for strong ale. This was no quiet retreat but a carnival of humanity, where spiritual quests began with decidedly earthly revelry. But the most revealing find might be a single silver coin, minted in the reign of Richard II, Chaucer's patron, and the monarch who commissioned the poet's burial in Westminster Abbey. Pierced with a hole, it was likely worn as a pilgrim's talisman, a charm against highwaymen and bad weather. In a stroke of poetic symmetry, it dates to within a year of when scholars believe the Canterbury Tales was written. Hold that coin today, and you're touching an object that could have jingled in the purse of Chaucer himself, or one of his fictional creations. It's a rare overlap of artifact and allegory, proof that the line between history and literature was always thinner than we think. The Tabard's relics do more than illustrate medieval life. They reveal how pilgrimage shaped London's identity. Southwark wasn't just a suburb but a liminal space where travelers shed their pasts before stepping onto the pilgrim's path. The badges, the dice, the worn-out shoes, they're fragments of a ritual that turned ordinary journeys into sacred narratives. And in that sense, Chaucer's genius wasn't inventing characters but recognizing that every pilgrim passing through the Tabard's gates was already a story waiting to be told. The pilgrim badges found at the Tabard Inn weren't just keepsakes, they were wearable proof of devotion, tiny amulets that transformed ordinary travelers into walking testimonials of faith. Each badge told a story. A scallop shell from Santiago whispered of treacherous mountain passes, while a vial-shaped relic from Walsingham promised a drop of the Virgin Mary's milk. These objects didn't just commemorate journeys, they sanctified them, turning blistered feet and stolen purses into spiritual currency. But there's a delicious irony here. The same streets where pilgrims prayed were lined with vendors hawking counterfeit relics. A thriving black market sold Becket's blood in suspiciously abundant vials, and unscrupulous merchants passed off deer bones as fragments of saintly finger bones. The line between sacred and scam was often as thin as the gilt paint on a pewter badge. This tension between piety and profit reveals medieval London's entrepreneurial spirit. The Tabard cellar yielded not just badges but also ledger scraps detailing the inn's booming trade in pilgrim packages, discounted rates for group departures, bulk sales of pre-blessed bread, even a sideline in renting out sturdy staffs and waterproof cloaks. Chaucer's host, that jovial master of ceremonies, likely operated as both spiritual guide and shrewd businessman, capitalizing on the pilgrimage craze that made Southwark the medieval equivalent of a travel hub. Excavated tally sticks show transactions ranging from a single penny for a night's lodging to hefty sums paid by wealthy penitents hiring private guides. The pilgrimage industry didn't just support the tabard, it built entire economies, from the armorers selling protective amulets to the scribes forging authentic letters of indulgence. Yet these objects also served a deeper psychological purpose. For pilgrims facing bandit-riddled roads, relics offered tangible protection. A badge depicting St. Christopher wasn't just decoration, it was insurance against drowning, worn like a medieval seatbelt. The discovery of several badges deliberately bent or pierced suggests they were ritually activated, possibly pressed against saintly shrines to absorb holy power. Some even contained tiny parchment prayers rolled inside hollow cores, discovered when corrosion split them open centuries later. These weren't souvenirs but sacraments, blending superstition and theology in ways that would make a cardinal blush. The most telling finds might be the broken badges, discarded ones snapped at the pin, likely lost in the scrum of crowded inn yards. Their presence hints at a darker side of pilgrimage culture, the pressure to perform piety. In an era when social status hinged on visible devotion, losing your badge wasn't just careless, it could be socially disastrous. A 15th-century satirical poem found nearby mocks a merchant's wife who hath a brooch of Bromholm rare, yet never stepped foot past Chelmsford Fair. Relics became currency in a game of spiritual one-upmanship, where the wealthiest pilgrims returned trailing entourages and sporting jewel-encrusted reliquaries that put their neighbors' tin medals to shame. What emerges from the tabard soil is a paradox, a system where heaven and hucksterism coexisted. The same badges that inspired tearful veneration also fueled cutthroat commerce. The relics that healed souls also lined pockets. But perhaps that's the most human lesson of all. Whether clasped in prayer or brandished for status, these objects remind us that devotion has always been tangled with desire, for protection, for prestige, for a story worth telling when the journey ended and the fires at the tabard burned low. Beneath a nondescript office block on London's Bankside, archaeologists in the 1980s uncovered a ghost, the skeletal outline of the Rose Theatre, where Shakespeare's earliest plays first breathed life. The excavation revealed more than just foundations. It unearthed a time capsule of Elizabethan spectacle. Walnut shells and hazelnut husks littered the floor, remnants of groundlings snacking during performances, while fragments of ceramic money boxes showed how pennies were collected mid-show to keep the theatre afloat. But the most tantalizing find was a single, waterlogged scrap of paper lodged between floorboards, a piece of a script, its ink blurred but the word "Tempest" still legible. Was this a lost line from one of Shakespeare's plays, or a glimpse of the collaborative chaos that fueled London's first golden age of theatre? The Globe Theatre, reconstructed just yards from its original site, offers another puzzle. During its excavation, workers found a most peculiar artifact, a lead token stamped with the letter T, pierced for hanging. Similar tokens were used as admission tickets, but this one's crude markings suggest it might have been a forgery. Proof that Elizabethan audiences, like modern ones, weren't above sneaking into shows. The Globe's yard also yielded a trove of dried peas, likely ammunition hurled by displeased spectators. These finds shatter the romantic image of rapt crowds hanging on every word. Shakespeare's groundlings were rowdy participants, quick to cheer or jeer, turning each performance into a high-stakes duel between playwright and public. Among the most revealing discoveries are the remnants of stagecraft itself. At the Rose, a hollowed-out animal bone drilled with holes was found beneath the stage, a whistle to cue wind or thunder effects. Nearby lay flecks of red and yellow paint, traces of the lavish backdrops that transported audiences to Verona or Venice. But it's the globe's hellmouth that truly captivates, a trapdoor leading to a cellar where actors playing ghosts or demons would emerge through smoke and fire. Charred wood around its edges confirms accounts of pyrotechnics so intense they eventually set the thatched roof ablaze in 1613, burning the theatre to the ground during a performance of Henry VIII. These artifacts also expose the social hierarchies of Shakespeare's world. Excavated pipes and fine glassware from the upper galleries contrast sharply with the simple wooden bowls found in the pit, mirroring the divide between wealthy patrons and penny-paying groundlings. A single gold ring set with a sapphire lost between floorboards might have slipped from a nobleman's finger, perhaps even the hand of the Earl of Southampton, Shakespeare's rumored patron. Meanwhile, oyster shells stacked in drainage ditches hint at the bustling food trade that fed audiences between acts, a precursor to modern concession stands. The real revelation lies in what's missing. Despite decades of searching, not a single complete script or costume from Shakespeare's day has been found in these theatres. The paper scraps, fabric fibers, and broken quills suggest a culture of improvisation and reuse, where plays were revised nightly and costumes repurposed until they fell apart. This wasn't the polished canon we know today, but a living, breathing art form shaped by audience reactions and practical constraints. The absence becomes its own artifact, a reminder that Shakespeare's genius wasn't frozen in ink, but forged in the unpredictable alchemy of performance, where every show was an experiment and every artifact, from a forged token to a charred trapdoor, tells a story no folio could capture. The fragments of a velvet doublet, its embroidery still clinging stubbornly to rusted threads after 4 centuries, tell us more about Elizabethan theatre than any history book could. Found buried near the Rose Theatre's stage, this costume piece, likely worn by an actor playing a nobleman, bears sweat stains under the arms and hastily stitched repairs, evidence of performances so physically demanding they'd leave modern method actors gasping. Nearby, a child's leather shoe, impossibly small, hints at the boy players who took female roles, their voices not yet broken by puberty. These weren't just props, they were tools of illusion in an era when a change of hat could turn a baker into a king, and a painted cloak transformed a London apprentice into Othello. Reconstructing performances from these relics reveals a world of blistering creativity. Take the Thunder Run, a sloping trench discovered at the Globe's excavation site, lined with cannonballs. Historians initially assumed it was for special effects until they found stage directions in a 1603 prompt book describing how actors would roll the balls down wooden troughs to mimic storms. Even more ingenious were the angel machines, pulleys, and winches recovered from the Rose's foundations, capable of hoisting actors playing gods or ghosts 20 feet above the stage. A broken harness found tangled in the mechanism suggests these flights weren't always smooth. Imagine the gasp of the crowd as an actor portraying Jupiter swung wildly off course, saved only by a quick-thinking stagehand. But the real drama often unfolded in the audience. Excavated hazelnut shells crushed underfoot in thick layers paint a picture of rowdy spectators cracking snacks during soliloquies. Archaeologists even found a pewter beer stein dented as if thrown perhaps by a groundling unimpressed with a particularly flowery monologue. The debris tells us these weren't the reverent crowds of today. They were active participants, heckling villains and cheering heroes with the fervor of a football match. A scrap of paper salvaged from a Rose Theatre drain bears a scribbled note: "The Scottish play stinks like Yorkshire cheese." Even then, critics were merciless. The artifacts also expose the slapdash brilliance of Elizabethan stagecraft. A tin and glass lightning box found backstage held sulfur and flint to create flashes, while a charred wooden sword suggests fight scenes got too realistic. Most telling are the plot boards, small oak plaques with character entrances scrawled in chalk, proving that even Shakespeare's company winged it sometimes. One recovered board for a lost play called The Seven Deadly Sins shows last-minute rewrites, with an actor's name crossed out and replaced by another's. This was theatre on the edge, where forgotten lines and missing props were part of the show. Perhaps the most poignant discovery was a cluster of dried flowers near the Globe's stage trapdoor, likely remnants of Ophelia's grave in Hamlet. Pollen analysis revealed they weren't stage props but real blooms picked from the banks of the Thames, some still caked with river mud. In that detail, we glimpse the Elizabethans' genius. They didn't just perform stories, they wove them from the fabric of everyday life, turning weeds into symbols and cramped wooden stages into universes. And when the applause faded, these fragments, sweat-stained velvets, dented tankards, flowers pressed into dirt, were left behind like footprints, proof that the greatest magic of all was making the temporary unforgettable. Chiseled into the weathered stones of London's Roman wall, hidden beneath centuries of grime and graffiti, lies a secret dialogue from the past. Names, curses, and even shopping lists left by the people who walked these streets 2,000 years ago. These aren't the grand declarations of emperors or the carefully carved inscriptions of officials. These are the raw, unfiltered voices of everyday life in Londinium, scratched into the city's bones by fingers long turned to dust. Take the simple phrase, Lucilia loves Secundus, etched near what was once a bustling market gate. It's a moment frozen in time, a teenage romance immortalized in stone, as fresh and human as initials carved into a tree today. But not all inscriptions are so sweet. Near the old military garrison, the wall bears the marks of bored soldiers, crude drawings of gladiators, tallies of gambling debts, and one particularly vivid curse targeting a centurion named Marcus, accused of stealing someone's wages. The Latin is rough, misspelled, as if written in a fury. Nearby, someone else took the time to carve an intricate phallus, a symbol of luck in Roman culture, right beside a measurement marker, suggesting even engineers had a sense of humor. These scratches are more than vandalism. They're a living record of the frustrations, hopes, and dark jokes that bound a distant society together. The wall also served as an ancient bulletin board. One stretch near the river bears a series of tally marks, likely tracking shipments of grain or wine. Another section lists prices for goods: olives 5 denarii, lamp oil 3, as if someone turned the stone into a makeshift ledger. Most haunting is the fragment of a prayer to Mithras, scrawled by a soldier far from home, his words blurred by time but his longing still palpable. Protect me in this dark place. It's a reminder that Londinium wasn't just an outpost, it was a mosaic of lives, each leaving behind whispers in stone. Scholars have even uncovered evidence of political dissent. Near the site of the governor's palace, someone risked punishment to carve Nero iesti stultus, Nero is a fool, a dangerous opinion in an empire where criticizing the emperor could mean death. The inscription was later partially scrubbed away, but the defiance lingers. Elsewhere, a Celtic merchant left his mark in both Latin and Ogham script, a bilingual signature that speaks to London's role as a crossroads of cultures. What makes these inscriptions so powerful is their intimacy. The grand monuments of Rome tell us what the powerful wanted remembered, but these rough scratches show us the people history often forgets: the homesick soldier, the love-struck teen, the disgruntled laborer. They're proof that even in a city of stone, humanity always finds a way to speak, and as long as these walls stand, their voices won't fall silent. These rough etchings on London's Roman walls are more than idle scratches. They're the unfiltered pulse of a city, captured in moments of frustration, devotion, and dark humor. Take the crude caricature of a centurion with exaggerated features, his nose comically large, discovered near the old garrison. It's a joke that transcends time, the ancient equivalent of doodling a mustache on a boss's portrait. Nearby, a hastily carved tally of wine debts, Lucius owes Gaius 12 denarii, reads like a pub tab frozen in stone, proof that some social rituals never change. But what makes these markings extraordinary is their ordinariness. While emperors commissioned grand arches to celebrate victories, the people of Londinium turned the city's walls into a communal diary, scribbling their stories in real time. Compare this to the political slogans found near the Forum, where someone risked exile to scratch "The taxes are worse than the Briton spears" into the plaster. It's a complaint that could echo through any modern protest, linking us directly to the frustrations of a baker or dockworker 2,000 years ago. Even the shopping lists, salt, wool, a new lamp wick, reveal the rhythm of daily life, with handwriting so rushed you can almost see the writer balancing a basket on their hip. These inscriptions weren't meant for history books. They were bursts of emotion, practical notes, and inside jokes pressed into the fabric of the city itself. The parallels to modern graffiti are impossible to ignore. Just as Roman soldiers staked their identities with crude phalluses, symbols of luck, today street artists tag walls with stylized signatures, both asserting "I was here." A love note like "Claudia kisses Marcus" could easily be a 21st century Sharpie heart on a park bench, and the political dissent, swap "Nero is a fool" for a stenciled critique of a modern leader, and the impulse remains identical. Both cultures use public surfaces to voice what official records suppress: the messy, human truth beneath the polished narratives. Yet there's a key difference. Modern graffiti often fades under pressure washers, while these Roman marks survived precisely because they were absorbed into the city's bones. When Londinium's walls were repaired, workers didn't scrub away the graffiti, they built over it, layering new stories atop old ones. A section near the Thames even shows a Celtic trader's advertisement, "Fine wool from Camulogenum," written in both Latin and Ogham script, preserved under centuries of mortar. This accidental archival gave us something rare, not just the grand arcs of history, but the whispers between them. Perhaps the most poignant discovery was a child's practice alphabet, painstakingly carved near a schoolhouse. The letters grow steadier down the line, as if we're watching the moment literacy took root. Nearby, a soldier's homesick verse, "The beer here tastes like swamp water, but the pay's good," could have been written yesterday by a contractor far from home. These voices remind us that technology evolves, but humanity's core desires, to connect, to complain, to leave our mark, stay stubbornly the same. In a city where the past is constantly paved over, these scratches endure as proof that even the quietest lives echo through time. The Thames doesn't just flow through London, it guards its secrets. For centuries, its murky depths have given up treasures that defy simple explanation. Bronze Age swords bent deliberately as if offering them to unseen forces. Celtic coins stamped with gods' faces tossed like prayers into the current, even jeweled brooches from the Roman era, their pins still clasped as though whoever released them couldn't bear to let go. These aren't casual losses, they're sacrifices carefully placed in waters ancient cultures saw not just as rivers but as living gateways to the divine. Imagine standing on the Thames's banks 3,000 years ago, the air thick with the scent of wet earth and burning herbs. In your hands, a sword, your grandfather's sword, its blade nicked from battles you'll never know. You straighten the metal with a ritual hammer, then fold it once, twice, until it's useless for anything but the gods. This was the fate of countless weapons found in the river, their deliberate destruction a paradox. To give something precious was to make it irrevocable. Archaeologists call it ritual killing, a practice seen across Europe where objects were fed to the waters to secure favor, victory, or safe passage. The Thames, with its tidal surges and unpredictable currents, would have been especially potent, a capricious deity demanding tribute, but it wasn't just weapons. The river has surrendered hoards of coins, like the 200 gold Celtic staters discovered near Wandsworth, each stamped with stylized horses and sun symbols. These weren't lost purses, they were deliberate deposits, possibly marking treaties or harvest cycles. The Celts saw rivers as liminal spaces where the physical and spiritual worlds blurred. A coin flung into the Thames might buy a king's protection or a bountiful season, its value transformed from currency to covenant. Even the Romans, for all their engineering pragmatism, adopted this belief. At Battersea, a spearhead was found wrapped in expensive cloth, an offering so carefully prepared it suggests the invaders respected the river's old power. The most haunting finds are the personal ones. A 1st century AD curse tablet, its lead sheet engraved with a plea to the goddess Sulis to punish a thief, was dredged from the riverbed near the Roman Forum. Folded tightly to bind the magic, it's a snapshot of desperation, hurled into the water where only the gods could answer. Nearby, a child's leather shoe, laces still tied, whispers of a different kind of offering, perhaps a plea for health or a grieving parent's farewell. What unites these objects is their intentionality. A dropped sword lies flat, a sacrificed one is twisted, a lost coin tumbles randomly, a votive one clusters with others in a silent pact. The Thames didn't just collect these items, it curated them, preserving acts of faith in its anaerobic embrace. And in that way, the river becomes more than a waterway. It's London's oldest archive, its mud pages filled with stories of fear, hope, and the unshakable human need to reach beyond the visible world. Even now, as dredgers uncover new offerings, we're reminded that the Thames wasn't just a witness to history. It was a participant, its currents carrying prayers we're only beginning to understand. London's artifacts don't just tell stories, they rewrite them. From the Roman dodecahedron's silent riddles to the Thames's sacrificial hoards, each object forces us to confront how much history remains unsettled. These aren't mere curiosities gathering dust in museum cases. They're active puzzles challenging the tidy narratives we've crafted about the past. Take the Leadenhall sarcophagus with its Egyptian motifs in the heart of Roman London, or the Walbrook skulls, their origins lost between ritual and rebellion. These artifacts refuse to fit neatly into textbooks, and that's precisely what makes them invaluable. They remind us that history isn't a locked vault of facts but a living conversation, one where every discovery can upend assumptions and spark new debates. What's most compelling isn't just the mysteries themselves, but what they reveal about how we grapple with the unknown. The Cheapside Hoard's glittering gems could be a merchant's panic or a thief's stash, each theory reflecting our own fascination with wealth and survival. The Mithras temple's star-painted ceiling speaks to universal yearnings for transcendence, while the Tabard Inn's pilgrim badges expose the timeless tension between faith and commerce. Even the humblest finds, like the child's toy horse or the folded Roman curse tablets, whisper of emotions that transcend centuries: hope, fear, love, and longing. These objects don't just belong to the past, they mirror the very human questions we still carry today. So where does that leave us? With more questions than answers, and that's the point. History's enigmas aren't gaps to be filled, but invitations to wonder, to investigate, to imagine. Maybe you look at the London hammer and see an ancient anomaly. Maybe you think it's a hoax. Perhaps the Billingsgate helmet strikes you as a soldier's plea to the gods, or just a careless drop into the river. That's the beauty of these artifacts. They're mirrors, reflecting back our own perspectives as much as they illuminate the past. Now it's your turn. What's the London artifact that haunts your curiosity? Have you stood before the London Stone and felt the weight of its legends, or puzzled over the Rose Theatre's script fragment, aching to know what words have been lost to time? Share your theories, your wildest guesses, the connections you've drawn that no textbook would dare suggest. Because history isn't just something we study, it's something we shape, one question, one discovery, one conversation at a time. And in a city like London, where every cobblestone hides a secret, the next great mystery might be waiting just beneath your feet.